I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about how technology gets adopted in society. And it really has very little to do with us or with the politicians or anything else. It just sort of happens because it's there, it's available to be distributed, and business generally decides to do it. So, for instance, in London, you can see that that you're filmed every day walking through the streets of London, if you're walking through the streets of London, about 70 times by CCTV. It's an example of quite a potentially invasive technology which nobody really ever asked for, but is there. This is something which I picked up from a news story from the BBC. The police decided to introduce their own network with no real discussion, where they can read number plates of cars and for sort of so-called terrorist prevention purposes or criminal prevention purposes. But in fact, what's happening every day is that we're filmed as we're going around with no real discussion by society. Another thing which is in there is, we all think our camera phones are great, maybe they are, but they're also quite intrusive sometimes. There's been countless celebrities who've been photographed and filmed in in private sort of circumstances, perhaps when they're taking a break or on holiday or something, and you don't really want everybody with a camera going, sort of snapping your photograph and putting it on Facebook. It is quite intrusive. And again, I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing, I'm just saying it just happened without really discussing it. Mark Zuckerberg constantly changes his definitions of privacy and what we should be accepting and what's good and what's bad, and it sort of really seems to be down to how he feels on the day, what he can get away with. And again, that is really unregulated by Facebook, the consumers of Facebook, the users of Facebook, and indeed society generally. So the message really is we don't vote for politicians on the basis of how they react to technology. And the politicians, to be honest, don't really talk about it either, mainly because they don't really understand it. This is a guy called Senator Ted Stevens, who recently died, unfortunately. But he was a senator in his 90s in America, and he wanted to be sort of cool and down with what his home is and everything, and started to talk about an explanation of the internet as a series of tubes, is what he was saying, which demonstrates very clearly that he doesn't really understand what he's talking about, and he's probably typical of the average politician in terms of how they understand technology. So let's change pace a little bit. That's how things happen in society in terms of new technology. We're about to come on to something which is potentially far more profound than anything which I've described in terms of being filmed or invading our privacy. And that's what is called the singularity. And the singularity can be applied to lots of different emerging sciences. But what I'm talking about today really is the singularity of artificial intelligence. And to put it bluntly, this man, Ray Kurzweil, who's also a founder and lecturer at the Singularity University, he popularized the phrase. He didn't come up with it, but he popularized it when applying it to artificial intelligence. And what it actually means is the point in time, in the future time, when the machines take over from us. So machines become sentient, actually figure out that they could probably do a better job than we can running the planet, and bang, that's what happens. Now that might seem far-fetched, it might seem sci-fi-ish, and there's been lots of books and sci-fi around that kind of thing, and we'll come on to a few of those in a minute. But to understand why that might happen, you need to understand two concepts. First of all, it's not like we have to invent those machines. What we have to do is invent a computer which is powerful enough to invent another computer which can then go on and become self-replicating, inventing ever more powerful machines. If we do nothing, or pretty much the same as we did the last 25 years, by the way, a mobile computer today, which we call a mobile phone, will be 1 billion times more powerful and 10,000 times smaller. So it'll be about the size of a blood cell and 1 billion times more powerful. That's just if we carry on at this rate. But there's a concept which I need to explain to you, which is called exponential growth. And all you need to understand is this graph. So, but I'll give you a simpler idea behind it. Basically, exponential can apply to a number of different things, but it basically means that it doubles every given time period. And when we talk about exponential technology growth, we're normally talking about doubling every year. That's very, very hard to understand for us with our lizard brains, or perhaps it's dinosaur brains. So I'm going to give you an analogy, or a couple of analogies of how that works, and try and explain that. So imagine you're in this huge football stadium, and you're at the top, at the back, in the cheap seats. and somebody comes on in a little white coat at half-time and puts a single drop of water on the middle of the center spot and walks away. Now, that drop of water is magic. It's exponential. It grows exponential. But rather than doubling every year, it'll double every minute. So the question you have to figure out is, there's one drop of water in the middle. How long have you got before it fills the stadium to the top and you drown? Now, our lizard brains tend to think, well, maybe a couple of days, or is it years? You know, what's the answer? And the actual answer is 49 minutes before you're dead at the top. And that's an example of exponential growth. But there's a couple of things to notice that. First of all, at 45 minutes, the stadium is 93% empty. So you're still sitting at the top at 45 minutes. You've got four minutes to save yourself. And you think, that's never going to happen because it's right down there, you know. But it's going double, 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 and then it overtakes it. And the other thing to notice is that most of the growth, most of the time, has actually taken place under the turf. So technology today, when you see it's all moving very slowly, all the growth is happening under the grass. You can't really see it happening. And then you see a little bit of a flood, and then bang, it's there. And that's why technology exponentially growth often takes big businesses by surprise, because it hits them around the head when they're not really expecting it. So another little quick example, this is a character from my youth. I don't suppose there's many English people in the stadium today here. Well, Buckley, yes, Dick Dastardly and Buckley. And he's going to have a race with Ray Kurzweil across America. It's about 3,000 miles from New York to LA. And Buckley is going to go at linear speed. So he's going to go 60 miles an hour all the way across. And Ray is going to travel exponentially. So he's going to travel a mile the first hour, 2 miles a second hour, 4 miles the third hour, et cetera, et cetera. You get the exponential thing. So what happens? After 4 hours, you can see Ray hasn't really moved. But Dick Dastardly and Buckley are well on their way. They think they've got this one in the bag. After 7 hours, again, Ray's hardly there. He's just sitting there, still somewhere around New York, and Dick Dastardly is kind of across the Midwest, or the Mideast, rather. 8 hours, Ray's just ahead. 9 hours, Ray's nearly there. 10 hours, Ray's going to make it in about 5 minutes. So that's how it works. But the interesting thing is what happens after 15.5 hours when Dick Dastardly and Buckley are just about getting into Chicago. Ray's back at square one. Why? Because he's already been around the world once. So that's how the power of exponential technology. And you can imagine next time he'll go twice around the world, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why it's very difficult to understand sometimes. So when we talk about these exponential concepts, you have to bear in mind that that's what's happening. So when I say when the machines take over, this isn't something which might happen, you know, in hundreds of years' time. They're predicting it's going to happen sometime about 2045-ish. So most of the people in the room will be alive if you look after yourselves to experience this. So where does that leave us? Clicking uselessly at this. So how's it going to happen? Well, there's two kind of explanations about why it might happen. Now, don't forget, because we don't really understand what's going to happen, this is all speculation. The most educated person in the world who's actually taking us towards this new vision of AI can't really tell you how it's going to happen because nobody knows. But this is a couple of scenarios. First of all, we could become some kind of transhumans where we merge with technology. I've already talked about a mobile phone being 10,000th as big as it is today in 25 years' time. So that if that's the size of a blood cell, how's that going to be used by us? Will it be a blood cell? Will it be zapping around our body, doing cancer and stuff? And maybe Yuri's got some ideas on that when he talks about medtech in a minute. So the basic idea is we merge with machines in some way, hopefully not looking like that, but something slightly more elegant. Or the other idea is, well, actually, you know, our brains are just organic computers. And if we could digitize them in some way, which we should be able to because it's only a series of electrical impulses, we could all beam ourselves up, live in the cloud, and live in a sort of virtual world, which in fact is identical to the real world. In fact, we could be living in that world today and we wouldn't really know about it. It would be identical. Now, there may be a few problems with this. People say, well, you know, what about these computers? How are they going to respect us? Are they going to look after us? And is it going to be safe, basically? And a lot of the programmers involved in this say, well, you know, don't worry, we'll make sure that there's some fail-safe laws in there to make sure that they look after us properly and that, you know, they're cool guys and they won't sort of destroy us or harm us in any way. And they often point to this guy who is Isaac Asimov, who is a great scientist as well as a sci-fi writer. And they point to his 3 laws of robotics, where basically it says you shouldn't hurt people. But actually, most of Asimov's stories were about these laws being overcome in some way, and the problems with the laws, rather than actually them being a foolproof recipe. They'll say it's going to be fantastic, it's going to be like heaven. In fact, there's many aspects the way people think about this or parallels to religion, because you're promising to save people, they're going to live in heaven, they won't have to do any work, etc. So what will heaven be like? Well, there'll be end of wars, because the computers won't want wars anymore. Let's do that. Everybody will get fed. It'll be a time of a post-scarcity economy. Obviously no terrorism. No work, actually, because no one needs to produce anything. No death, because you don't need to die, especially if you live in a digital world, or indeed if you've merged with machines. Yeah. You know, they predicted that anybody who can stay alive till about 2045 will probably live forever, or if you want to, obviously. And also possibility of using some of the DNA of our ancestors to recreate them, so you can actually, you know, bring back some of the cool people who you're descended from and find out what they were all about. But one of the issues with this, I thought was very well expressed by a book written years ago called The History of the World in 10.5 Chapters by Julian Barnes. And in the last chapter, the man, the hero, if you like, he dies and he goes to a sort of heaven type of place. And he's lying in this really nice bed. A lovely woman comes in the morning, brings him a cup of tea, says, what would you like to do today? And he says, oh, well, I'll tell you what, I'm really into golf. I'd like to go and play St Andrews. So he goes to St Andrews, has a great day out. He plays the course at St Andrews better than he's ever played before, personal best, fantastic. Next day, she comes in and said, what would you like to do today? And he goes and plays a few more golf. But after a couple of weeks, he's sort of like getting a hole-in-one and everything, so it's like a bit boring. And then he goes to play different golf courses, gets hole-in-one eventually everywhere, gets a bit boring. So he decides to you know, make love to every single woman he can ever think of that he fantasized about as a young man, and that happens as well. And he has dinner with all the interesting people. And then eventually, you know, at an unspecified time, the woman comes in one morning and says, what would you like to do today? And he said, can I just die? Because I've done everything I want to do. So maybe there's something in the human psyche that actually doesn't need to or want to live forever. Other scenarios, well, obviously we saw the Terminator, Skynet wanting to destroy humanity. Probably slightly pessimistic, but you know, it's an option, I guess. I think another worrying scenario for me personally, being a vegetarian, is that when the machines look at us as very, very inferior species, they might say, well, okay, I don't really understand these guys because they're so inferior, but when they had a duty of looking after other inferior species, how did they treat them? Oh, let's put them in a battery hen house, or treat them like we do pigs in modern farming. So I think that's a sort of slightly scary analogy too. And of course, you've got the Matrix type of scenario where, you know, they just keep breeders for fuel. So what does all this mean? Well, a couple of observations. First of all, it's really important now, more than any time in history, to stay healthy, and Yuri will be talking about how you do that. Because if you can live to another 30 years or so, there's a real chance you'll be able to live forever. So actually dying in the next 30 years would be like getting shot in the last shot of the war, when everybody knows there's already a peace treaty signed, and so try and stay alive would be my view. From a practical point of view, if you're thinking about starting a new business, you've already seen how technology is growing exponentially. So when you're thinking about the business and the tools you need, don't think about what there is today. Think about what it's going to be like in 2 years' time. Then double it, and you might get that right. Because what you don't want to do, for instance, is say, hey, look, I'm going to start a PC-based idea, and PC is getting faster and faster and faster. When we go forward 2 years' time, and actually nobody's buying PCs anymore. They're all going on mobiles and tablets. So that's a simple example. But think big, think long term, and think about those tools. We were in a presentation with Mike earlier on, or a discussion with Mike earlier on, and we talked about this book, which is a book by Cory Doctorow, Down and Out of the Magic Kingdom. I can recommend it because it's a sort of post-singularity literature and one of the better ones. And there's a concept of everybody has a value to society. So everybody gets basic things to eat and live and exist. But if you want to get good stuff in life, like the extra recognition and stuff, you need a special skill which is valued by society, which he calls woofie. In my pronunciation, that might be right. Other people pronounce it differently. But woofie is a sort of social currency which you get, in his case, by helping to maintain the old Disney World so that people can go and see what we used to do sort of 500 years before. So think, if you are wanting to go into this world, how you can add value over and above your day job, because it's not going to hack it very much working for a big company or indeed a small company in those side of things. It'll be how you can add value to society in a different way. What I always try and say is, I don't know, I haven't got all the answers, I don't know what the questions are half the time in this thing, but I think it's important that we as a society start talking about this, because there's a very few people in the Bay Area, in California, who are working on artificial intelligence and coming up with this stuff all the time. And if they do it in isolation, we're going to have a world designed by engineers for engineers, and as some Google products show, that's not necessarily a great thing all the time. So that's all I have to say today. I think most people, when they come across the singularity as a concept, are either very excited or very frightened. I think as MLOVE, I think you should be both. I think you should be excited, but also very frightened. Thank you very much.